Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for coming before the committee. I have a couple of questions. First, I have a question just to follow up on, the WIC program and the SNAP program. SNAP has much less restriction on what can be purchased. Just from a dietary improvement point of view, why don't we restrict it much more along the lines of WIC? I mean, would that be beneficial, in your opinion?
WIC, that question has been raised. And
I know. Dr. Rowe and I co-sponsored a bill in the last Congress that, in fact, would begin to move SNAP toward WIC guidelines. Again, looking for, what's good for women and children is actually good for all of us.
Oh, well, WIC, as you know, and you would know professionally as well.
I have a bunch of questions, so it's just a simple question. Do you think it would be beneficial to move SNAP guidelines toward WIC guidelines?
I think it would be challenging to do so. But
would it be beneficial? I don't know. You're Mr. Okay. Is it beneficial? Your role is to figure out what's good for the American people.
If
so
everybody
I take it
ate healthier, we'd all be
Thank you
better.
very much. Now, let me ask you a little bit about some of these, because, I've been through the, if you're in medicine long enough, you've been through cycles. 30 years ago, margarine, very good, butter, very bad. Well, now it's exactly the opposite. Eggs, very bad, now they're okay. Salt, very bad. Now you actually have these large reviews, including the Grotto review in the American Journal of Hypertension, the Pure study in the New England Journal, that suggest that in some people, low sodium actually isn't good because it has only a marginal benefit in reducing blood pressure, but it has significant benefit, includes 7% increase in triglycerides, 3% increase in cholesterol, or a couple of percent increase in cholesterol. So given that, why no asterisks in the guidelines that came out, the advisory committee guidelines, to suggest that, in fact, this is, in fact, growing very controversial in the scientific literature as to who is benefited by low sodium intake, and, in fact, some people could be harmed by a low sodium intake. Does that worry you that we make kind of global statements that actually could be placing some people at risk?
No. I mean, I would say.
Okay. No, thanks. I appreciate your. I appreciate. We'll move on to the next one. It worries me, because I was taught in medical school. Everybody's different, and what we do with these guidelines is presume everybody's the same, and that everybody would benefit from a certain intervention, or that there's no controversy when in fact it exists. Let me just talk a little bit about the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program. According to the report, I guess it's USDA's own report, they say that the lunch program has improper payment rates of $1.75 billion. The school breakfast program, $923 million. Now, even in Washington, that's a lot of money. It's $2.7 billion. What is USDA doing to bring this rate down to much more manageable, much more rational levels for the American tax? Look, Americans, if someone needs school lunch, school breakfast, that's fine. But how do I explain to my taxpayers that we're spending $2.7 billion in overpayments? Is somebody watching the shop?
It is a challenge. It is a challenge in the school meals program. There are two aspects of it. One is underreported household income, and the other is on the meal claiming side of it. I should point out to folks that when a meal is served to a child, if that child, for example, doesn't take the half pint of milk, the whole meal is considered to have been an improper payment. So we don't do that in other program areas. You could say, well, maybe that represents 15% of the meal, and since 15% of the meal wasn't provided, maybe we ought to really discount it at that level. But don't count.
Well, of that $2.7 billion, how much is because someone didn't take the whole meal?
Significant portion of it.
Is significant.
Roughly half of it.
Roughly half. So what are we doing to deal with that?
Well, we work with school agencies across the country to encourage the folks who are often the cashiers or the staff to encourage children
to do it. Okay.
Take all of the components.
Let's move on. The Target 2, Target 3, Target 1, the whole school program. My understanding, and this is a follow-up on the sodium question. I mean, the bottom line is, they achieve Target 1. Target 2 and Target 3 are going to be very difficult without flexibility in the sodium levels. And, because I kind of searched the literature, I'm not sure there's really any good literature that in children reducing sodium intake actually is proven to be beneficial, not harmful. I mean, again, because we know in adults it can increase triglycerides if you're normotensive. Most children are normotensive. Therefore, I would conclude that most children might have a harm, not a benefit. Is this taken into account when we go into Target 2 and Target 3 levels?
Yes, I think there's been a lot of misinformation about the sodium levels in the school meals program. We had somebody here in the district that came into town here within the last few weeks suggesting that the school meals program was urging a level of 1,500 milligrams in sodium. Not the case. Even Target 2 is based on what's referred to as the upper tolerable limit. And even then, these young people will be consuming more than is recommended by the dietary guidelines. So it's very reasonable, it's doable, and even the Institute of Medicine, when it made the recommendations to us, said, implement this over a 10-year period because there's so much sodium in all of our diets.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Let me just follow up a little bit about the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. My understanding is that once they issue their report, which was issued, they're supposed to be disbanded. But now I understand that members of the committee have held discussions regarding their scientific report findings. One event held February 25th at Harvard, another professor speaking in the Hall of States here in Washington tomorrow. I'm curious whether or not these are supported by federal dollars, these events that are being held.
Oh, they are.
Okay, good, because that would be a little worrisome if you're supposed to disband something, but it keeps on spending dollars. Let me just follow up with the whole grain, because again, I think the gentleman from California is absolutely right. We create these rules and then we kind of require waivers, and his point actually about I haven't even thought about that about the low-fat milk, but it's right. If you walk into some stores in some neighborhoods, in fact, probably a lot of neighborhoods, you may or may not find 1% milk or skim milk reproducibly on the shelves.
You'll find it in WIC stores.
I understand that, but let's pretend they sell out of the 1% milk that day. And I know no one's ever gone to a store before a snowstorm, for instance, and not seen milk on the shelves. And I get that, but the idea that it's all or none, or I got to come to the federal government for a waiver, and the whole grain's a good example. I mean, look, I do most of the family shopping now. You can't buy everything whole grain. You can look for it, but sometimes just not available. So with regards to the whole grain standard, so I take it that the idea is let's go full forward into the all whole grain standard with allowing waivers instead of saying, okay, it's probably more reasonable to say, look, if we're halfway there, that's good. Go back to the half grain, the half standard, 50% standard for whole grains. Is that I take it the direction you're going?
That would be unfortunate to go backwards. There's no need to do so. Remember that standard holds over the course of the week.
Sure.
Grain rich and
sure. Let me ask you a question. Let me follow up with a question, because if I had a SNAP benefit, I could go buy regular grains, right? I don't have to buy whole grains. So on the one hand, the department says, it's okay if using the taxpayer-funded dollars to buy regular grains, and we'll actually pay for it. But in that circumstance, but we won't do it in another circumstance. Where's the logic behind that?
There are different laws that have been passed by this Congress that govern those programs.
And the law says that you have to go to the whole grain, to the all whole grain? Is that what the law says? Am I missing something here?
The law and the federal regulations ask us to follow the dietary guidelines, and then the Institute
Excuse
of
me, you
Medicine.
said law and federal regulations. They're different. A law and a regulation is different. Is it in the statute that we have to go to 100% whole grains? Is that statutory or is that a regulation? Because you understand the difference.
Yes.
I understand the difference because I make one and you make the other. So I just have to ask you, do you have the flexibility to go to draw that back a little bit, given the difficulty that that we've heard that some locations have in going to 100% whole grain?
I think it's already been done.
Not through waivers. Do you have the ability to rein back in the standard? Because my understanding, the standard.
Whole grain rich, by the way. It's not 100% whole grain.
Okay. Can you just okay?
It's only 50%.
No, the 2012 standard is half of the grains are whole grain rich. Now it's all the grains are whole grain rich, right? Okay, but there's two 50%s because before 2012, 50% of the grains had to be whole grain rich. Right, okay. So, and that's, just let me clear it up once and for all, that's not statutory. Correct. And the same regulation, I assume, maybe could be done for other places where we allow non-whole grain rich foods to be purchased, like the SNAP program. Is it statutory? So under the SNAP program statute, you could not require a certain percent of the grains to be whole grain rich?
Correct. We're not allowed by statute.
Specifically.
Specifically.
So we might just have to correct that. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the additional time.